Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Environment. What steps is the government taking to reduce the amount of rural plastic waste being burnt, buried or ending up as countryside litter?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the government is working with farmers and their support industries to recycle and reuse the plastic waste generated mainly from silage wrap. The nationwide Plasback scheme was one of the first accredited product stewardship schemes, and yesterday at the Agricultural Field Days in Hamilton I announced the first grant from the Waste Minimisation Fund to support the program.
John Hayes.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, what advice does the Minister have on what is currently happening to this plastic waste and what will be achieved by the new scheme?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I've been advised that the bulk of the 7,000 tonnes a year of plastic farm waste is currently burnt. This results in the release of toxic chemicals into the air. A further portion is buried. The ambitious goal of this scheme is to establish a network of on-farm recycling facilities throughout New Zealand with an aim of recycling 2,400 tonnes by July next year. The government is working to lead the same sort of culture change that has occurred over the past decade or two with households who now extensively use curbside recycling, albeit the logistics of distance make farm-based recycling of plastics more challenging.
John Hayes.
Mr Speaker, through you to the Minister, what provision has been made to ensure that there are economically viable uses for the collected rural plastic waste? Because I'm aware that some recycling schemes have got into difficulty because of not being able to economically use the collected waste.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, of course it's important, as the member says, not just to collect the waste, to have a practical use for it. The proposal that the government is backing involves a recycling facility in Christchurch that's able to use, including the dirty silage waste, to be able to remanufacture it into products such as piping that can be used, and as well as bins. The scheme also provides for the reuse of agricultural chemical containers that, if left on farm, can result in pollutant, and this scheme involves them being reused, which I think is a good outcome.
Charles Chevelle.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Minister assure the House that none of the 966 tonnes of e-waste collected at last year's E-Day will end up in New Zealand landfills? And when, if ever, will he approve a product stewardship scheme to allow computer buyers to recycle their old computers at point of purchase so as to reduce the 80,000 tonnes of e-waste ending up in New Zealand landfills each year?
The Honourable
Mr.
Dr Nick
Speaker,
Smith.
I am quite concerned about what has occurred with the e-waste. There is currently a prosecution before the courts in that a subcontractor to the 2020 Trust was involved in the unlawful export of e-waste. I've asked my ministry to work with the 2020 Trust on establishing proper systems to ensure that this e-waste is properly dealt with. A preferred option would actually to have a recycling facility in New Zealand to be able to deal with the different waste streams, and the Ministry is exploring whether there are possibilities to use funds from the Waste Minimisation Fund to support that.
Question of Charles Chevelle.
I just wonder whether the Minister...
Is this a point of order?
Yes, sir. I wonder whether the Minister might address the question relating to the product stewardship scheme in this area.
Order. I think the Minister gave a pretty reasonable answer to a question that actually didn't have a lot to do with rural plastic waste. Question number 4, Sir William Sewell.
Mr Speaker,